Here we go.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to our second session. We are talking about the book, The Physics of God by Joseph Selbie. And I am going to change, the view. So I think, okay, that'll be better. And we're on chapter 2 today that's called The Science of Religion. And what I kind of get from chapter 2 is like, we're looking at near-death experiences on one end of the spectrum and the experiences that people have near death and then coming back to life, and then looking at like mystics, saints and sages, and their ability to transcend our reality that is defined by sensory awareness. And both experiences we can see have a lot of similarities, and no matter of like background, like ethnic, religious, spiritual background, people are having the same experiences of transcendence. And we can look at it from a scientific perspective, and we can look at it from the experiential, like just what people share about it, to kind of find similarities. So I'm excited to dive into that today with you, Stacy. And then and we're going to start with a little breath practice just to kind of bring us all into center. And so Stacy's going to lead us through.
Okay, yes. Awesome. I'm excited too. It's just this book starts to like open up different thought processes. So
Yeah, and we are moving at it slowly together, reading. I mean, personally, like I'm going slowly through this book and just appreciating that too.
yeah, totally.
So
It's
much.
no pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a second here to like come into together. So eyes closed. Start to turn away from your external vision and turn on internal vision. Notice the space surrounding you, where you're located, the walls, the ceiling, the roof. And then draw your attention closer in towards your body, from the perimeter towards the center. And feel the breath that moves within you, expanding and receding into the space around you. Bring your attention ever closer within your body and observe an entire round of breath come in and down through your nose to your belly, and then back up and out from belly towards nose. Not labeling or judging, but noticing, being here right now. Come together in moment and space and body and attention. And may we share and communicate and translate this book and the messages from our deepest heart's place. Thank you. Alrighty.
So nice. Meditation, prayer.
Yeah, like you were saying, Morgan, the one thing that stuck out for me, sort of from like the beginning of the chapter, says that the disciplines that bring personal transcendent experience deserve to be considered scientific because they provide consistent and repeatable results when practiced to perfection.
Yeah.
And I was like, that like sums it up on how you can take like the transcendent experiences, like you said, from a wide variety of cultures and times and peoples, and describing sort of the same thing.
Yeah, and it's talking about like the scientific method. Like for something to be considered science, one scientist has to prove it, and then it's handed off to other scientists. They have to be able to prove the same results. And so
Totally.
in terms of like explaining a transcendent experience, we don't have like the technology to like show us
Sure.
kind of like if if like we could record what's happening in our dreams, then that would be the way that we could show it, like with a tool per se. But so scientists are using EEG scans and fMRIs to show the activity in the brain and how it shifts in deep states of meditation. And like they've done it on a couple of monks and like very experienced practitioners. And I was
Mhm.
fascinated with the limbic brain, the lower part of the brain stem, is associated with like primal emotions of fear. What other primal emotions are there? Fear, like kind of like
Here.
contracted states. Yeah, and that happens in the lower parts of the brain. And then as we move into transcendent experiences of like love and empathy and connection, like those are coming, and that's all about like the frontal lobe and the higher parts of the brain.
Totally. I know,
That's
it's so
the
cool.
that's the first time I made that connection. I'm like, okay, like those lower, like our lower chakras are what hold the more dense emotions, lower part of the brain.
Mhm.
The higher chakras hold the more like transcendent emotions and like connecting to higher realms and stuff. And that's happening in the front of the brain, higher parts of the brain. It's so cool.
Yeah. It seems like once you kind of get some of the pictures and the connectivity, it's so simple and makes so much sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's like everything.
It's like
Um,
seeing the pattern.
Seeing the pattern. Yeah, I remember when in my yoga teacher training, when I was learning about like the pancha vayus, the five winds, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's five elements that are like the five forces of nature. We have five fingers, we have five toes, we have five senses. And I was like, went up to my teacher, I was just like, oh my gosh. And then he just listed off like a bunch of other things. And I was like, those moments where you're like, oh, it's all the same. It's all the
Yeah.
same. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um,
Mm.
oh yeah, and he talks about stillness and inner absorption
Yeah.
being like what brings about the transcendent experience, and
Yeah.
how like coming into stillness and turning off the parts of the brain that are concerned with like all the sensory input all the time.
Mhm.
And like immediately yoga nidra came to mind for me. I was like, oh, that stillness that the body's in, and
Yeah.
then the inner absorption when you are like just so tuned out from out here, but you're inside, and just how wide and vast, and like there's a lot that you can do in those realms.
Right. Yeah. And it's the inner absorption and stillness. And in this chapter, they were kind of like drawing the line between that and meditation, having that experience by choice or not by choice in near-death experience brings out the same kind of ability to transcendent experience, all of that sensory input. And the sensory input is what keeps us kind of stuck in a way in this reality. And maybe I should stop viewing it like I'm stuck here.
You're perceiving this. Yeah.
Perceiving and connected to like all of the beauty around us and able to smell it and touch it and taste it. But beyond that exists so much more.
And we have to quiet that reality that we're so used to in order to perceive the more subtle ones. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's the challenging part for a lot of
It is.
us, to take the time to like really be still
Yes.
and quiet.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna read this little part
Mhm.
about the area of the brain that shuts off when our sensory input is weakened. They saw a significantly decreased level of activity in the orientation association area, OAA, located near the top of the brain. In our normal waking state, nerves constantly send information to the OAA, from which our brain provides us a continuously updated mental picture of our body's current position, orientation, sensations of temperature, points of contact with other objects, and so on. While in deep stillness, these nerves, normally stimulated by movement, stop sending new information to the OAA. This happens naturally when we fall asleep. When it occurs during the conscious practice of disciplined stillness, test subjects say that they become increasingly less aware of their bodies until that many feel entirely bodiless. Um, have you had that experience, Stacy, or like, can you speak to it in meditation, or maybe there was something else in your life where you completely lost sense of your body and kind of what that's like?
Yeah, I think for like the big like whole body stuff, a lot of it has been more in like a nidra practice where
Mm-hmm.
my entire body is like totally relaxed. And you've probably felt this too in a nidra practice where you kind of come in and come out as you hear the teacher talking. And just like being present, but being elsewhere. And I know sometimes in like a seated meditation, sometimes you get this like it's almost like body dysmorphia in a way where like if your body might be in a certain position but then it feels like you're like super leaned over or something, but like when you open your eyes you're still upright or vice versa.
Yep.
um and yeah, just I really love the like weightedness, how my body feels in nidra, where it's just like almost like a rock, it's just like
Yeah.
that's all I can describe it as.
Yeah, I've been trying to explain to some friends in my life like why I love Nidra just for laying down, like just the laying down for meditation, like how that shifts so much. And these people, they're kind of meditating more for like relaxing and like, as like a tool for anxiety, not as a tool to like go beyond their physical body. So it's less relatable, but like when you lay down and you just have that muscular relaxation, it makes it speeds up the process, I think.
And I do know that's such a fine balance, right, between like awake and asleep.
Yeah.
But when you can start to like walk that line,
Yeah.
um, and just have this like expansive
Yeah.
experience, and also not tethered to the past or the future, the things that are like the worries and the chores and the things down here, it's there,
Mhm.
it's liberating.
It is liberating. Yeah. And I loved how they explained the near-death experiences and people like sharing those experiences and being kind of afraid or like apprehensive to share because the experiences they had were so like otherworldly.
Totally. And
Um,
often hard to put like into words, right?
hard to put into words. And like when you have those kinds of experiences, sometimes you can question, how real
Yeah,
they are because they're so
totally.
unlike what we're experiencing all of the time. And
And also mentioning like the metabolic processes that slow down when you go
yeah.
into the states. And I always think of like energy not being created nor destroyed, but transferred. And so the
Mm,
energy that you're usually putting towards all the sensory experiences, or even like your heart rate and your metabolism, when that is like quieted, it goes elsewhere. Like it
yeah.
has to go elsewhere. And then that where like the power of mind and attention and learning how we are connected to this information field, it just I get super excited by it. It's
Mhm.
like this whole other part of me is opened up that I'm like, maybe we need to spend more time in that part of me.
Yeah, if you're into like discovery or it's so new. Like you start opening up that part of you inside of you, then you can go anywhere. Or it's on like
Oh,
limitless possibilities, which is so exciting.
yeah, I
And
agree.
we get to
What else?
explore it. I mean, there's one part I was looking for about near-death experiences being like feeling almost more real than real life, like how and that being a hard thing to explain in words how real it feels. And I think like I can relate to that in meditation and just like when you anchor into the space of you that is awareness and just observing, like that is the most real I ever feel.
Oh yeah, totally.
because other, if I'm in my life, I'm walking around, I'm so identified with my body and how I look today and like my
What I'm
outfit
doing.
and what I'm doing, what I'm saying, that it's right, that it's wrong, what you're doing in response, like all of that stuff, that doesn't feel real to me.
It's like I want a vacation from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, how do we anchor that part of us that is aware more into our everyday life and bring it with us, like
Mhm.
out of the near-death experience or out of the meditation, bringing it into real life feels so important and challenging too.
I feel like it just before we started to record it, we were talking about coming back, and being
Yeah.
like anchoring back into everyday life. If you've had I've heard near death experiences being called just death experiences now and taking away the near part because it's like you had one,
Yeah.
and for like to come back from that and like you said, to just like walk your feet on the ground all of a sudden and like get
Yeah.
going through life. I think like I feel like it's those moments. What's coming up for me lately is I call them mindful moments, and they're like take 3 to 5 minutes in my day to just like coherence. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that's me, and like, oh, coherence. Oh,
Yeah.
that's me, and
Yeah.
like, right, right. It's like a reminder, right? Just like you need to drink all the water every day. It's like coherence check.
So
Yeah,
here
that's what's coming up for me.
I love that. Yeah, honestly, I want to share like this one experience that I've had myself, and it's something that I like am afraid to talk about a little bit, but I feel like this is the perfect place to tell a story.
Perfect.
So one night it was a full moon during Leo season, middle of summer. And I went out onto a paddleboard onto a pond all by myself. And I laid under the stars on the paddleboard. And I started to jump into the water. Like, it was late at night, it was dark, but the moon was out, so it was pretty bright. But this pond, I know in places it's like 90 feet deep, like pretty deep, and there are big fish that live in this pond. And I started jumping into the water. And at the time, I was dealing with like a lot of fear in my life. And the fear was so present for me in those moments. And like, I was so afraid to get in the water, but I was like, fuck this. Like, I'm getting in the
I'm
water.
like feeling your fear right now because I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, I was like, no. And I was like, no, like I'm doing, and I used it as a way to like clear my fear. And I just kept jumping and plunging into like the unknown, dark waters, cold, deep. And I would just like jump in and kind of let my body be still and sink down into the water. And I don't know how many times I did it, a lot. And then I got out and just laid on the paddleboard again and probably maybe did some like body scans, some like yoga nidra practices. And I opened my eyes up and looked at my body, and my physical body turned into the stars. And I was moving my arms and my arms like in front of my face, in front of the sky, and like and moving them like this, and they were the stars. Everything. And I've told some people this story who look at me and are like, you're nuts, or like, okay, like I guess I kind of believe you. And I sometimes don't really believe myself, but that experience was so real. And I will walk around for the rest of my life remembering and like holding that experience as just like in my little treasure box of like magic. But it was so real. My body turned into the stars. And like I'm in astronomy class right now learning about how we are made of, every single molecule in our body is from the death of a star. We're made, like we hear that we're made of star stuff, we're made of star stuff. So for me to perceive that in a new way, to see it, like it's not that far out. It's a little far out, but
But not really.
not really. And it's like, and we're 99.9% space. So we see, and I can't see that right now. And I'm looking at our physical bodies, like, but there's got to be ways we can shift our consciousness. We do it in meditation. when we're still, when we are absorbed in our own inner world and we perceive our body as space, we see our body, it's a big practice in yoga nidra to see the body as a sky of stars and to perceive all of that space. So for me, just to like see it through the visual lens,
Mhm.
how different is that from seeing it with my eyes closed?
Right. It's
Yeah.
like seeing and feeling kind of.
Yeah.
And and I also think it's like an identity crisis or shift or whatever, like we've been conditioned to think like we're only physical. And like, as this book talks about, like there's been this rift between science and spirituality, or like energy, or whatever you want to call it, being like, no, we can just
Mhm.
separate our body into parts and we're mechanical and things aren't related. Or or there's other evidence. And it's like, it's about like shifting this identity of like we can no longer think of ourselves as we have been led to think of ourselves.
Yeah.
And like you said, if we're made out of the stars, the planet's made out of the stars, the same, like everything comes down to the same components. And
Yeah.
again, it's not that difficult. It seems really difficult, but it's not when you can reduce it to be like, there's no separation and it's all the same. It's just
Right.
different degrees on a spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it challenges like our world, a lot of views that we have about the world, but the periodic if you look at the periodic table, all of those elements are come from, they can tell you what kind of star each one came from, what kind of like explosion of a star they came from, and that's it. That's the basis of matter.
Right. I'm excited for chapter 3 actually, because I've been thinking a lot about light lately, and the light show illusion of matter. The
Yes.
light show illusion of matter just like sums it up. Like and learning how like light, a photon is basically created when an electron like loses, like it gains power and then falls back down, and what comes off of that energy is light. And like
Yeah.
I think about our bodies and these electrons just like spinning and moving and spinning and moving, and how like our light, our aura, our power comes from that force, like that activity that like I'm not thinking about my electrons to make them
Right.
that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to talk about that too. Well, and read it. I have not read this chapter yet. And yeah, I mean, I'm like thinking about those Aura cameras that are kind of like trendy.
Mm, totally.
Yeah, and just how that like we can we'll be able to explain that after we read this chapter, I'm sure. Yay. Okay, is there anything else you want
um,
to share about chapter 2?
um, I did notice the sentence that says basically the science of matter's view of reality is based on the repeatable and consistent findings of physical experiments. The science of religion's view of reality is based on the repeatable and consistent findings of transcendent experience.
Yes.
And it's both. It's not and or, either or, whatever. It's both.
Yep. Yes, it's like one foot in one world, one foot in the other world. It's kind of how we're one foot in like matter in this 3D, the life that we're living. We have to like walk on the earth, and then we have another foot in like the infinite field, information field.
And it's like, it's wholeness. It's like coming back into the whole of ourselves. And like, yeah, I
Yeah.
find like that infinite part of me that I can just sit down, like I said, for those moments of coherence and be like, oh, yeah, there's the part of me that's not all this.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I'm gonna read one more quote from the book.
Yes, totally.
Since my return from my near-death experience, I have experienced the light spontaneously, and I have learned how to get to that space almost any time in my meditation. Each one of you can do this. You do not have to die to do this. It is within your equipment. You are wired for it already. And that quote is from Mellon Thomas Benedict.
Mm,
And yeah, I keep coming back to this analogy of like being a computer and like downloading new software, and how meditation, like learning how to transcend the senses, like connect to source, connect to the universe, connect even just to the space around you, like starts to download new information into you. And we have the software to like receive the information. It's just a matter of figuring out like how to what to shift so that we can plug in.
Yeah, it's like a radio. You
Yeah.
know, like turn the dial, tune it to whatever,
Yeah.
rather than be super distracted in our life. Why?
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
Thank you, Stacy.
thank you. I love these subjects and I love these conversations with you.
Me too. It's so sweet. We'll be back for the light show. Wait, what is it? The light
The light
illusion
show illusion of matter.
next week, chapter 3.